Did you know that some people are able to roll their tongue while others can't? Tongue rolling is the ability to roll the lateral edges of the tongue upwards into a tube. The tongue intrinsic muscles allow some people to form their tongues into specific shapes, but not everyone can. If you are part of a group that cannot, don't worry, there's still hope, as there is a possibility that you could achieve to do so by practicing. Right now, you may be wondering, how is this possible? Well, let's start by saying that it is commonly believed that tongue rolling is an example of a Mendelian genetics case, but it is actually not a simple genetic character, as it is thought to be. Believe it or not, this trait is influenced by both genetics and the environment. How crazy is that? Let me explain it for you. Some characteristics, such as the color of our eyes, are passed down from our parents, but other characteristics may not. These characteristics are defined by genes, and these genes have variations called alleles. Alleles can be dominant, codominant, or recessive. This defines the ability of an allele to overtop another allele. Now that we understand this, we are able to say that tongue rolling is a characteristic or gene controlled by a dominant allele called T, while the absence of the ability to roll our tongue is defined by the recessive allele called T. When we are conceived, we receive half the genes of each of our parents, as eggs and sperms only contain half the number of chromosomes of normal body cells. This means that gametes carry only one of each pair of alleles, and when an egg and sperm join together at fertilization, forming a zygote that will develop into the new individual, it has now two alleles of each gene. Different combinations of alleles will produce different variations of the same characteristic, say, the ability to roll our tongues or the absence of it. As the rolling tongue allele is dominant and the non-rolling tongue variation is recessive, if we had a genotype of rolling tongue allele and non-rolling tongue one, the result of phenotype would be the presence of a rolling tongue, as this allele dominates over the non-rolling tongue allele. The same would happen if the case was of two alleles that code for tongue rolling, as both code for the same variation. But it would be different if we had a phenotype of two alleles that code for a non-rolling tongue characteristic, because the phenotype would be a non-rolling tongue. Why would this happen? Because although the allele that codes for a non-rolling tongue is recessive, in this case there are two identical alleles for the gene. This might sound too confusing, so let's put what we have just learned into an example. Say your parents both have the ability to roll their tongues and have these genotypes. Your mother has a dominant and recessive allele, and your father has both dominant alleles. If we did a Punnett square, we would get a pair of two dominant alleles and a pair of both dominant and recessive alleles. As all the resulted combinations have a phenotype of the rolling tongue characteristic, this means that there are no chances that your parents have children with the inability to roll their tongues. What I've just explained is the genetic part of the causes of the ability that some people have to roll their tongues. But as I mentioned before, there are also environmental causes for these characteristics. There is a possibility that you may have the tongue rolling gene, but the effects of the gene can be seen without some sort of trigger from the environment. Another cause might be that by practicing, some people that cannot roll their tongue at first and managing to achieve it. So if you're one of those people, you know what to do. Go practice.